So I should be like 1 month. I think that's what I mean. That's kind of where
Hello everyone, welcome to OWASP London. So we are today here at Amazon, and before we start, I'm just gonna play one short video clip from Amazon Security. It's only gonna last 1 minute.
My name is Andrew Johnson. I'm a security engineering manager at Amazon. I work in the security intelligence team for the consumer payments business. And so in security intelligence, we're tracking adversaries, we're emulating those adversaries, and then we also run a detection team. So we write the detections on making sure that our consumer payments pipeline is all secure. We are the personal trainers for Amazon. So we're both the offensive team, we try and hack our own services, and then we are also the defensive team. So in the way, it's a lot like a gym. We have the trainer out there who's trying to push you forward, and then the actual trainee who's getting better, stronger, learning what they need to learn, developing what they need to develop to be able to respond to adversaries better. When I was a kid, I wanted to be an astronaut, but sadly I got a little bit too tall. But I liked the idea of trying something new, going out into space that not very many people have done. And I found that security is a pretty good analog for that. There's always something new going on, something new we need to track, some new idea we're going to try, and so it's worked out pretty well. I think the most exciting part of the job is the day-to-day, just the fantastic people that we get to work with. We really have built up some amazing teams tackling really, really tough problems, and that's the most fun I have at my job, is interacting with those people, building those teams, and having them all work together to secure our customers.
Excellent, and let me now move on to my next slide in the presentation. I just need to make sure that it works, and let me introduce Will and Peggy, who are heading up Amazon Security Vulnerability Management. So, Will,
Thank you so much. Hey everyone, how's it going? Really appreciate everybody coming out today. It's always great to see the security community get together on nights like this and share information, share knowledge. We are a little bit selfish here at Amazon. We want to say we have an amazing team. We have an amazing opportunity for people. We have paused hiring for the year, but if you are interested in any open roles, scan the QR code, share your information, and we're happy to get in touch with you in the future. We're looking forward to a great talk today, and let us know if you have any questions. Thank you all very much.
Just add one thing. We are excited to be here. There's a number of people that are from Amazon. If you guys are interested in finding out more about, what it's like at Amazon, life and the careers, we've got either the blue or the, maybe everybody raise their hand. Thank you. And all in one corner. So over there. Yeah, kind of. So definitely feel free. We'll have our speakers. We'll have a break in between, and then some social afterwards too. So really appreciate everybody. And if you do scan your code, you will be eligible for a raffle. So we'll do a raffle at the end of the session as well too. It is a gift card to Amazon. Yeah. Come on, who can't use that? Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Sam.
Excellent. So just as Peggy said, please do scan this QR code, which is currently on the screen. It will take you to the Amazon candidate registration. You will be able to submit your personal details and your CV, and you will be on the Amazon Security good list of candidates, because once they restart hiring in the new year, you will be probably the first people they will be calling. So let's move on with our OWASP London chapter meetup. We are live streaming this meetup right now on YouTube. My name is Stepanyan. I'm one of OWASP London chapter leaders. We have Andra. Andra, can you please wave your hand? We have Andra Litzer here. She's another chapter leader. And we have Sharif Mansour, who is unfortunately not with us tonight because he's in Amsterdam on a business trip. If you are going to tweet about tonight's event, please use OWASP London hashtag and mention at OWASP London. I think you will appreciate a lot of the slides from the presentations that tonight's speakers are going to be presenting. And the agenda for tonight, after my quick update about the news and updates of what's happening at OWASP, we're going to have Stefania talking about securing DevOps and where to start and what to measure. Then we're going to have a Q&A for Stefania. We're going to go short break while we change laptops, and you will be able to chat to each other and grab some more food and drink, which is still outside. And then we're going to have Dario talking about how to live in passwordless future. If you hate passwords like me, and everyone who hates passwords, you have to listen to this talk because it's going to be absolutely amazing. And after that, we're going to have more drinks. So I hope you all found us okay, but by the show of hands, how many people are here for the first time? Never been? Okay, ooh, a lot of them. So how to make sure you do not miss our next event? So what can you do? You can follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook. You can follow us on Meetup, YouTube, LinkedIn. We have a page. You can follow us there, or in Eventbrite. We also have OWASP Slack, so I urge you actually to follow us on OWASP Slack. If you need an OWASP Slack invite, it's very simple. Go to owasp.org/slack/invite. OWASP Slack has lots of channels. One of them is a channel called Jobs. So if you're looking for a next opportunity, that's the place to look for any application security or DevSecOps related opportunity, or just chat with like-minded peers in DevSecOps and AppSec. We also have an old-fashioned mailing list which you can join, and link is available on the website. So I'm going to play a short video about what is OWASP.
OWASP is a nonprofit that stands for the Open Web Application Security Project. OWASP is a community of developers, technologists, and evangelists improving the security of software through tools and resources. OWASP has 100+ active projects, and new project applications are submitted weekly. Projects are open source and are built by our community of volunteers, people just like you. Community and networking. There are hundreds of local chapters worldwide and thousands of members. Meetings are free and open to everyone. They include training, talks, and networking opportunities. Education and training. OWASP hosts many events each year. They are a great way to improve your skills, build your professional network, and learn about new trends in the industry. One of the many ways you can get involved is to become a member. The membership benefits include discounts for events and trainings, your own OWASP email address and Google Workspace access, a vote in our OWASP Global Board elections. And recently, OWASP added a brand new member benefit, access to hands-on application security training through the OWASP Secure Flag Open Platform. Join us and become a member today. OWASP is a nonprofit that's...
Okay, let me move to the next slide. And you heard about the benefits. So some of the benefits available also are we have Purple community training on the application security. All the courses created by Tanya Jenka are now free. They used to be $500. If you're a OWASP member, you get it for free. Also, as a member, you will get exclusive access to AppSec Phoenix, which is an application security posture management platform, which is also a great benefit. Additional benefit, you will get access to Security Journey trading platform. So these are all the new benefits we have. If you are a member of OWASP, you will have access to OWASP membership portal, and OWASP membership portal will have the links of all the training systems and platforms that you can get access as a member. Membership in OWASP costs $50 a year. The British pound sterling recently done a bit of a dive, so it's about £40 a year at the moment, which is still great. It's still less than 1 cup of coffee a month. Students get a discount, so if you're an active student, you only have to pay $20 a year. And also, you can become a corporate supporter if you're a company. If you wish to become a member, you just visit owasp.org/membership. Of course, you've seen all the various benefits of becoming an OWASP member. There's a special benefit from me because I have exclusive access to some stash of OWASP member stickers, which do not exist anymore. So if you become a member, come and talk to me, and I will give you the sticker for your laptop. Another important thing of OWASP membership, of course, you get a right to vote in OWASP board elections, and we actually did have elections this month. Right, the elections finished on 31st of October, and I'm pleased to announce that the 3 new board members who got elected to OWASP board are Mark Curfey, and Mark is actually the original founder of OWASP. I'm pleased to announce that Mark is actually now moved from San Francisco back to UK, and we are very pleased to announce that we're going to be inviting him to speak at one of our future events. He's absolutely awesome individual. So once we announce that event, we'll try to make sure that we get a big venue like this one to make sure that everyone can attend. The next person who is now going to become an OWASP board director is Matt Tesoro. He's another great guy. He's a creator of OWASP DevSecOps and lots of other OWASP projects. And Bill Corey has also been re-elected. Quick word on the corporate membership. We have a lot of corporate members. So if your company wants to underscore its dedication to building and developing secure applications, you can become a member and have your logo featured on our site. We also have a number of companies which support us, OWASP London chapter. We're pleased to announce that, you can see all the logos of the companies who sponsor us on the screen. I'm pleased to announce that recently we had Zimperium, which has joined us as a London chapter sponsor. So shout out to them. Thanks very much for your sponsorship. We also have a number of companies who've been hosting our meetings. So my ask is, if you have an office with a meeting space like this one, please come and talk to us, because we're always on the lookout for venues to host our events, and they're getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And of course, very big shout out to tonight's meetup host, Amazon Security. I already mentioned that there is a membership portal. If you're a member, you can access it using members.owasp.org. A quick word about Merch Store. If you want to get something with an OWASP logo on it, you can go to owasp.org/store and buy a piece of merch. And everything you buy there will be a donation to the OWASP Foundation, which is, of course, a non-profit. Big event happening right now in America, in San Francisco, is our Global AppSec USA. It's happening tonight and tomorrow night, so lots of talks. They will all be published on OWASP Global YouTube channel. Make sure you check out, because all OWASP global conferences, they publish their videos, I think probably a couple of months after the event. But there's lots of videos just published from the previous global AppSec conference, which took place virtually, and lots of very good talks. I think about 57 fantastic talks and 4 keynotes that you can check out. The next big conference, which is going to be close to us, is Global AppSec Dublin in February 2023. So if you are a company and you want to send your developers or security people into a conference where they can learn a lot of good stuff from the world-renowned speakers, please start registering, because registration is now open. I think you can still get the early bird discount. So as always at OWASP conferences, we have first 2 days of training, so there's just training workshops, and the last 2 days, which is usually Thursday and Friday, is the actual conference. Will be taking place in Dublin in February. Big shout out for the Black Hat Europe event. This is a big event happening in December. For those of you who don't know, there's of course Big Black Hat USA event, which happens in Las Vegas every summer, but we have a local event in London, which is Black Hat Europe, which is going to happen in Excel. And we are going to be there. And we have a booth, as you can see, there's a little booth there with the OWASP logo. And we are looking for volunteers. So if you know a lot about OWASP and our projects, and you wish to donate 4 hours of your time on the 7th or 8th of December, please come and speak to us, because we need people to help us run the OWASP booth as a volunteer. In exchange, you will get, of course, the ticket to the conference. Just a a quick mentioning of all the OWASP projects. Of course, OWASP is not only about OWASP Top 10. We have more than 250 open source free projects, which includes standards, documentation, various security tools, including scanning and hacking tools, educational tools. So go and check them out at owasp.org/projects. And just a quick shout out to the mobile application security verification project, which just had a recent update, and you can go and download it right now and start using it. How to ask questions today. So if you're watching the stream online or you want to ask questions ahead of time, please submit them on slide.do/OWASP, because that will help us to present the questions early to the speakers. Unfortunately, I'm told that the microphone for taking Q&A tonight is not working. There's something wrong with the wireless connectivity. So if you're going to ask a question in the audience, please speak up after the presentation. So I'm going to introduce Stefania. Stefania is our first speaker. As we're going to swap over the laptops, I'm going to very quickly introduce her. So Stefania is a senior solutions architect at Gitlab. She has been doing solutions architecture and dealing with cybersecurity, DevSecOps, and open source software, and helping organizations for several years. Stefania is actually our OWASP lady because she helps OWASP DevSlop project. Go and check out OWASP DevSlop on YouTube. There are lots of fantastic talks there. And when not on computer, Stefania actually enjoys surfing, yoga, looking after tropical plants, and a lot of traveling. So if you follow Stefania on Twitter at DevSecOps, you will find lots of travel photos from all over the world. Welcome, Stefania.
Let me just connect myself. That would be a good place. So I'm having a speaker attached, like a mic. So I'll probably just be walking around a little bit. Let me do my timer. Okay, good. I'm connected. Stopwatch. Okay, cool. Let me just check. I've got 2 clickers here, so let's just see which is the right one. Not this one. Oh, that's the right one. Perfect. So hi everyone, thank you so much for joining, and those online, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are watching from. So today I'm going to be talking about securing DevOps, where to start, and what to measure. My name is Stefania Chaplin, I'm DevSecOps. You can find me on Twitter. I don't have a Mastodon yet, I'm not that cool, but maybe eventually. Also connect with me on LinkedIn or check out my brand new website. It's only a month old, so if anyone in UX wants to give me any advice or SEO, awesome. But anyway, back to the talk. I always keep my agenda purposefully vague so that it adds an element of suspense. So the fundamental questions: what are we here to talk about? Who is involved? How are we going to get there? Why are we even speaking about this? Summary and Q&A. And to keep it fun, I'm going to have little quizzes. So we don't have a mic to hand around. So instead, maybe, think of the answer. And then I'll tell you the answer. So, who am I? A little bit about myself. So I used to be a developer, Python, Java, REST APIs. So if someone presented to me a JSON, I'm one of those cool people that can tell you exactly what Python command you need to get the exact key or value you want, because that's just how my brain works. Then I moved into the wonderful world of security, looking at DevSecOps, AppSec, and CloudSec. So working at companies like Secure Code Warrior, Sonatype, and now I work at Gitlab, the DevOps platform. But as you can see from the slides, this isn't a Gitlab talk, it's a DevSecOps talk. Outside of that, as Sam said, I do a lot of surfing. I am really into my yoga, and I also have a lot of tropical plants and tend to travel to warm tropical countries because surfing in the cold isn't very fun. So, to my talk. Now what? So, we're about to come up with the first quiz, and I'm going to start you off easy. So, quiz time. What is DevSecOps? So hopefully, actually I'll do a show of hands. Who has heard of DevSecOps before? Okay, good. Okay, you're in the right room. Well done, everyone. So most people, when they think of DevSecOps, development, security, and operations. Tick. Well done, everyone who thought that. You get a gold star. I don't have any Amazon gift cards, my bad, but maybe next time. But actually, this is a definition that I found that I quite like, because it's not just about, who's involved. It's about culture. It's about shared responsibility, and it's about integrating security throughout the entire IT and really doing it secure by design. So when we think of DevSecOps, a lot of the time, you have your developers developing, involved with, planning, coding, doing the build and test. And then some people think, oh yeah, security, we're scanning, we create our, release candidate, and we're doing some scans, and yeah, we're doing DevSecOps, we've got security. But really, it's about having security embedded each stage. So planning, are you doing threat modeling? Do you have scans in the IDE? Are you doing, yes, scans as part of your CI, but also moving into ops. Logging and monitoring is a bit like eating your fruits and vegetables. I am vegan, so I do eat a lot of fruits and vegetables. But it's really a case of when you do get hacked, which there's not much wood around, but yeah, touching all the wood that I can, how long is it going to take you to notice? So there was a large credit rating agency in 2017 that got hacked. And so if you were going to go for a mortgage, they're the kind of people who would check your credit. It was 150 million people. It was just before GDPR. So it would have been, to put it in perspective, their market capitalization, their stock price, they lost about a quarter of their value. And it took them 4 months to notice they'd been hacked. Because the very first hack, it was an open source component, was just, who am I? And then once someone does, who am I? Maybe I'll walk over. So someone does, who am I? And then, oh yeah, now I can't see. Oh wait, I'll see off that. Someone does, who am I? And then, okay, I'm user 5000. Okay, now I'm admin. Let's have a look at these folders. Now we can move around. Now we're in ETC. Now we're in ETC password. Okay, cool, let's do some damage. So it was about 150 million people. I travel a lot, so I was in Sweden talking about it. That's 14 times the population of Sweden. And it's about France and Germany put together, and it was about 2/3 of America at the time. So this is why, on the upside, logging and monitoring is important, and also incident response. Once you know something's going bad, how long is it going to take you to notice? So coming back to OWASP, there was a recent change. The OWASP top 10 changes every 3 years, so this was the top 21. And this is for web applications. And what we saw is the new number 4. So this for me, because I really do love security, this was really exciting. Because with insecure design, what we're seeing is it's actually a component of 40 CWEs. So a CWE is a type of vulnerability. So for example, number 10, SSRF, that's a type of vulnerability. That has one CWE mapped. Whilst insecure design is actually a sum of a lot more, like 40 CWEs, and about, how we need to design our systems securely. So it's really shifting left with security. It's thinking about stuff like threat modeling, thinking about our systems, about code quality, etc. So, and why are we here? Why is this all important? So hopefully this chart may seem familiar. If it isn't, and you're working for security and no one believes you and you're fighting your case, just show them this. IBM do a really good version of it. And so did NIST as well, actually. But what we can see, even judging by the colors, if we shift left, so we're in requirements gathering and coding, it's not that expensive to fix a problem. I do a lot of sales training, and the way I used to describe it is, so if I'm writing a book, I'm writing my autobiography, and I'm writing it, and it's in Google Docs or Word, and I notice I've spelt my name wrong. Oops, my bad. It's a lot easier for me to fix it whilst I am in my local environment in my IDE. But what happens is, okay, now we have the prototype, we're about to send it to Amazon to distribute, and oh no, all of a sudden we get into production. I have 100,000 versions of my autobiography out in Amazon and other retailers, and my name is spelled wrong on the front. So it's really about, with shifting left, try and shift left as the name suggests, as early as you can. So common pain points, and there's quite a few, but I just wanted to highlight a couple. So security is the bad guy. I've been going to talks for a while, and the one that used to stick up was security. You're going through a bridge, and security is like the ugly troll underneath that's like, thou shalt not pass. And so now, security, and with DevSecOps, we're trying to get this level of collaboration. Security don't really want to be the bad guy. We're trying to help you, and especially if you're working in highly regulated industries, such as financial services, your security and audit are just trying to make sure we don't lose, everyone's money. So, especially when you have silos, which I'll talk about in a moment, that can be a real issue. So next one, vulnerabilities known and unknown make it to production. And it's worth noting both of those, because you might think you have problems, but depending on how thorough your security is, it's like an iceberg, you might have a lot more problems than you think you do. A lot of the time, I speak to organizations, big, small, all across Europe, all the different sectors. And some of them are like, yeah, we're doing security. We've got SonarQube. We're looking at our static codes. And it's like, okay, have you thought about your dependencies? Does Log4j ring a bell? Does that at all sound familiar for you? And then normally mentioning of Log4j, everyone kind of shudders, because that was a pretty dark time. And for those that don't know, Log4j is a Java framework, so it's used for logging. And I used to work in software scanning, and almost every single Java application I ever saw would have Log4j. And it was a nice neutral blue, no problems, so it's no issues. There was a problem with this very common component. And not only was it just a problem, it was a 10 out of 10 problem. And when I worked in open source, me and the other solutions architects would compare notes. We'd be like, oh, wow, I found a 10. Django version 0.7. This is a good one, because 10s are rare. So to have, if you think of attack vector, if you think about risk, as in like width and depth, this was a very big problem. So with vulnerabilities, you really want to think about what you know and what you don't know. Zero-day vulnerabilities come out all the time, so it's important to be on top of them. Because as the name suggests, delays, fails, or worse, that downward emoji graph, that unfortunately could be your stock price if you're not careful, because no one wants to end up on the front page of the news. And what I've noticed, especially, I say colloquially, now that security and ransomware, when we had the kernel pipeline and we've had loads of different attacks, it's on BBC News now. My family actually know what I do, which is pretty cool. So you really don't want to be on the front page. And securing DevOps, which I'm about to talk about, is a really good way to avoid that. I'm doing good. Every 5 minutes, I'm going to switch over and have a drink. Oh, I think I've got a quiz. So who? This is a little bit harder. So, and then I can have a drink. What is the difference between project mindset versus product mindset? I'll do a little show of hands. Who has heard of either of these terms before? Okay, so yeah, I told you, the quiz got a bit harder, If you do want to know more, before I give away the answer, there's a great book that I'd recommend reading about this. If you have ever heard of microservices, which are a pretty awesome way to construct applications, monolith versus microservices. And there's this great guy called Martin Fowler, and he wrote the 9 awesome things about microservices. It wasn't called the 9 awesome things, but that's how I remember it. I think it's just 9 things. But one of them was specifically this: project mindset and product mindset. So when we think of project mindset, think of Gantt charts. So you know how it used to be. Okay, in weeks 1 to 3, we're going to do requirements, and then we're going to do coding, and then testing, and then now we're really over budget, and we're behind schedule, and everyone in the CMO and everything is going behind our, it's all stressful. Who can we sign this off to get this done? So project, like the name suggests, you have these different stages. You have Gantt charts, but it's very siloed. It's like, okay, I'm done, hand it over, and it's very similar to, say, waterfall from the distant past. When we move to product mindset, what instead we're getting is we're focusing, when we think of product, think of our product team. Product team focuses on our customers. We listen to our customers. What do our customers want to see? What are they interested? Let's turn the customer voice into a product, and then we build it, and then deploy it, and secure it, etc. So when we have a product mindset, it's much more about the customer voice. It's much more about the roadmap and strategic vision. So it's much more about outcomes. And when you think of it like that, security isn't, a line in the Gantt chart. Security is a quality check. Security is part of the product, because if you have an insecure product, then, or that's low quality. That's not going to be good. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my silos. So talking about who. So got my developer, and I used to be one, so I can say these. So developers, we're KPI'd. We've got to do, we've got to focus on features. We like to keep on top of what's on the new and shiny, and how we can use open source frameworks or libraries to make our job easier to fit, our product related deadlines. Then we have security, and what you tend to find is you have about 100 developers on average to one security. And that will vary wildly. I remember I was seeing a medium-sized enterprise in Paris a few years ago, and there was one guy exasperated, and he's like, yeah, I'm actually after this, come summer, I'm actually quitting, and I'm just going to drive around a while, because he was the one security for 300 developers. And if you imagine trying to secure the workload of 300 other people, it's kind of a little bit tricky. And then you tend to have, if you're looking at those ratios, give or take, about 10 ops. And they all have different goals. So developers want things fast. Security wants things secure, and then ops wants things stable. So that's what we're really trying to get to, this holy triangle of, can we have it fast, secure, and stable? And it's about, well, unless you automate things, the answer is no. But it's how can we reach a state where we have that? And I'm going to talk a little bit about culture. So there's probably more than 3 types, but Wallstrom did a really good analogy about 3 different types. And I'm going to focus specifically on generative, because if you have a problem, so something goes wrong. If you have read or heard of the Phoenix Project, everything was going wrong. What happens when something goes wrong? Does it lead to scapegoating? Does it lead to justice? Or does it lead to inquiry? See failure as an opportunity to improve the system. And in order to do that, you need psychological safety. So you need to be in a state where developers, security operations, and the entire IT team and wider business can communicate and create this performance-oriented environment. So you have high preparation, risks are shared. I saw a talk, this was about 5 years ago. I was fairly, didn't know that much then, but at the time they were talking about SRE, didn't know what it was, but, apparently that's, quite a big thing now. And this woman was saying, she was from Google, and she was like, yeah, it's kind of like if you were at F1, and it's like changing the wheels whilst it's driving. So there was an outage, and I was responsible, and then I had to, I didn't quite fix it, the problem, I didn't quite do the right thing I did, so then the damage map was actually quite big. And then when it got to the team, the debrief, she actually put her hand up, yeah, it was my bad, could have fixed it a bit in a different way, done it better. But, risk, it wasn't blamed. It was like, oh, okay, well, you seem to have learned, you know what you need to do. So when we think about the people, we really want to have this cooperation and collaborative environment. Okay, 16 minutes. Because you don't want this. You do not want to end up in an unstable environment where things are falling over, heads are rolling, and you're having overall a bad time. So how are we going to do this? Quiz next. So where do we start securing DevSecOps? Hopefully this is a bit of a back to easy, mixing it up. So as the name suggests, we want to start shifting left. But before I talk about that, I'm going to mention some useful reading. So if, like me, you like to read tech books whilst you're on holiday by the pool, I would recommend DevSecOps by Glenn Wilson, because he's awesome, and also it's a very good book. I'm not that into reading, but it's very well structured, big fun. It was a good holiday read. And he talks about these 3 layers. So education, secure by design, and automation. Because when you shift left, I kind of think about it a little bit like Inception. You want to go into everyone's brain, not just the developers, but also everyone in the business. and be like, no social engineering. Don't click on that MFA that you don't recognize. Don't click on that link, etc. So having education. Developers are so busy with backlogs, fixing technical debt, if they do that, when are they given the time to train? And things move so fast that you need to allocate time to developers. Similarly, secure by design. How are your systems designed? Are they designed securely? Are you doing threat modeling? Are you thinking about code quality? And then automation. Some of you may have heard of Forrester and Gartner. They say clever things. Forrester said a few years ago, manual processes are doomed to fail. So if you don't automate, manual processes rely on humans, and we do make mistakes. So I was talking to someone from a large German bank, and they showed me 2 graphs, and I'm going to show them to you. So this is the age distribution, and one of them is for developers, average, and the other one is for video gamers. And as you can see, they're actually really similar. And the bit I was going to maybe ask, but I don't know. I could do a show of hands. Okay, who thinks the one on the left is the developers? So I got a couple in the room, maybe like a quarter. And who thinks the one on the right is developers? So a little bit more on that. Well, actually, I'll go up and show. Maybe I'll shout. So the way I noticed, 0 to 14, actually, developers is this one because they start, around 17, 18. You probably have a couple then. Whilst actually video gamers, you do have some younger people. So, but it was, it's a hard one, and I can see from the audience that it was hard to guess. So with that, what's the best way to approach this with developers? Moving to the next slide. So make security fun and easy. So what can we do? Gamification, because what have we just seen? Developers like video games. Everyone likes it. Everyone gets Amazon gift cards. Woohoo! So how can we do that? Keeping people engaged. Rewards, recognition. So you can do stuff. One of my favorite things to talk about and that I've seen live is get your development teams, set up a safe, separate environment. Half of you red team, so half attacking, half of you blue team, and go. And then what you normally find is the senior developers who know about the skeletons in the closet, they're usually like, okay, I know we're using some bad stuff, so, that it's a good way of getting points. And then the junior developers are like, oh my God, is it really that easy to hack? Like, wow, maybe I should think more about authorization and encryption libraries, etc. So having hackathon days is a really good way of doing it. And doing rewards. Like if, for example, have education as a priority, security training, for example, or, just any training, and then, okay, you've done an hour on Udemy. You can get a gold star. 5 gold stars, you get a free lunch or Amazon gift cards. So having that way. And then also there are gamified security platforms out there that you can use, and then having things like tournaments, setting up courses, and then using that to make it fun and easy. The second one, pause for a drink, is automation. Because actually what you don't want to do, you want to have things automated, you want to have it easy, you want to make the best path the easiest path, because then people will follow it. If the right path is a difficult path, certain people will take the easy path. So having things automated, having it reliable, and having it accessible and within existing developer workflows is a really good way to move forward. So this one I quite like, because how can you make things fun and easy? I do a lot of sales training, and I was asked, what is threat modeling? So here we have Bruce Wayne, Batman's threat model. And I think everyone can think about this, whether they're a developer, whether they're security, whether they're someone in HR. What are our assets? What data are we dealing with? So Batman, for example, he has his Batcave, he has Alfred, and then he has his data, which is his emails and his text. How are we protecting them? Are we using encryption, hiding our location, security system? And also, what are our threats? And this is quite an interesting one, because especially with what's going on in the world, security warfare is going to be, I think next year it's going to be painful. You're already starting to see pockets of it, come up, because at the moment, for example, Ukrainian war, fairly focused on themselves. What's going to happen, fingers crossed as soon as possible, when the war ends? It's like, oh yeah, let's just go after a British sewage company for fun. Like, that's the mindset of hackers. Hackers, I think it was, I don't know if it was Holiday Inn or Marriott, but one of them got hacked. I think it was a couple in the Philippines. They were just bored. So they're like, oh yeah, let's just put ransomware on the servers. And then incident response noticed, they were like stopping them, and then they'd move, stop, and so missing all the data because they were like, meh. So I think it's really important at every level to think about assets, protection, and threats. And explaining it in a fun and easy way is always a good way to get started. In terms of shifting security left, so this comes back to it being automated, it being easy, etc. So have a pipeline. Have security as part of a commit. So when I say security, I'm not just talking about your source code. I want to have everything. I want to have secret detection. I want to have container scanning. I want to have dynamic application security testing. I want to do open source components. I want licenses. I want everything. Is that so much to ask? No, that's what you should have. So it's about making it as easy as possible for developers, and even better, giving them the results to these tools, because a lot of the time if you're failing a build and a developer doesn't know why, developers are very, very clever people. We'll find a workaround. So empowering developers by not only giving them their results, but also empowering so that they know what they're talking about, what they're reading. If I said, I could do a show of hands. Well, actually, it's a security group, so we'll see. If I said insecure deserialization, who in the room knows what that actually is? Okay, it's a security room. This is good. Normally no one, people are like, what? So anyway, it's about shifting security left into the pipeline and into the brains as well. And what tools can you use? So this is when I come to your friendly neighborhood OWASP. So I'm going to have a few show of hands. I'll move to the other side. Who has heard of OWASP Zap? Used for dynamic. Nice. What about Cyclone DX? Used for SBOM. Similar show of hands, a few less. And finally, OWASP Dependency Checker. Okay, cool, a bit more. So these are some of the better known of the OWASPs, and I'll see if anyone's hand is up. Who has heard of, it's probably quite small, but all of the other OWASP projects on there. Okay, we have one, you get the gift card. So this is the thing, there are loads of tools out there that are available that can help you with this. It's a journey. I don't expect you to be able to implement everything I've talked about tomorrow, but think about the low-hanging fruit and think about how you can approach this. So, to quote Glenn's book, DevSecOps, education, secure by design, automation. You can't automate first, like you probably want to, but actually thinking about what you need, and OWASP is a great place to go to. So, next quiz question. How do we measure DevSecOps? I'm going to talk a little bit about the DORA metrics. And if anyone has heard, I could do a show of hands. This is actually funner than asking quiz. Everyone's like, oh, who has heard of or read Accelerate? Okay, a couple of people. Would recommend. Everyone's got some homework. So if anyone has read or heard of the Phoenix Project, the Phoenix Project was a fictional tale about DevOps. Every single thing that could go wrong. And I speak to organizations all the time, and after every couple of calls, I'll say to my colleagues, I'm like, yeah, that was just like in the Phoenix Project. Yeah, they've got some real problems. So with Accelerate, what they actually did, it's not a fiction book. They sent surveys to a few thousand companies. So you had companies from startups to like massive enterprise, and they're like, what makes elite performers elite? What makes good people good? And what makes low people low? And they came up with these 4 metrics. So, number 1, lead time, which can be measured. So for example, how long does it take for a commit to go, you write your code, commit, to it being in production? Is that minutes, hours, days, months? So what we found is, what the book found, not me, but the elite performers could do it in days to hours, and then the low performers would take months. And if you think about the implications of that, for example, if you're working in finance and you want to update all of your mortgage rates with what's going on in the UK at the moment, if you're going to take a couple of months to update that, you're going to have some serious problems. Deployment frequency, so this is a proxy for batch size. If you, like I said, talk to a lot of salespeople, and I'm like, remember how we used to have Windows 95 and 98, and now we have 365? So when you used to release every few years, that's a lot of changes. So what happens when it goes wrong? That's a lot of changes to sift through. But if you release 3 changes, that's a lot easier to fix. Or if you just change, if you have a very smooth process and you're releasing each change, like Amazon, then what you'll end up with is if it goes wrong, it's very easy to figure out, that one went wrong, and that's what I need to fix. So these ones are quite a lot about throughput, like how fast are you going. But it's very important to look at stability. So mean time to restore. When something goes bad, when the system fails, how quickly can you get up and running? And this one's very, very important for customers, because if they can't use your service, what's going to happen? Probably going to move to a competitor. Is there an equivalent? We see it, say, with social media. It's the minute that WhatsApp or Twitter or Slack, any of these social tools goes down, it's all over the other one, because they're like, oh wow, I can't talk to my friends or do my job. So good performers had hours, elite performers, low performers, yet again, back to months. And if you think about it, if you're taking a month to restore your product to your paying customers, that's gonna really impact you. And then finally, I didn't actually know this was a one before I read up about this. Change failure percentage, or change failure rate. So elite performers, 0 to 15%. What it means is I make a change and then it's good. Rather than if it fails, oh no, now I have to do a rollback, I need to do a patch, I've got problems. And it's really important to look at these all 4. I was speaking to a very large financial institution, and they had dialed in, thank God, because it was Zoom, and their lead time was 46 minutes, which is very good. And I was talking about this with another company, and they were like, yeah, we'd be lucky if we're 46 days. So that's what I mean, variance. So their 46 minutes, really good. Change failure rate, 60%. So what this means that over half of their changes fail. So this person was talking to me and he was like, we make a change and about half an hour later the build fails, and then we have to go back and then figure out, where did it fail, and then who's responsible for that, and then it was a big mess of Jenkins pipelines. And then it was like, Dave does that build, but Dave's on holiday, do we know? And he said, and this is someone fairly senior in a large bank, it takes us about 50 days to do 2 days work. And also, all of the developers, we hire them, they get frustrated and they leave. Or we hire them and if they stay, it's like, are they really the people we want to stay? So when we look at this, we've got the top 2, which are all about throughput, and the bottom one's about stability. And some good stats. Let's see. Oh no, I've lost my timer. Okay, I'm still good. 5 minutes, moving back. So, when they looked at elite performers, this is a little bit, it's 2019, little old, still relevant. We can see the changes. If you can deploy 200 times more frequently, or if you're 2,000 times faster, if you can recover your system in hours rather than days, this is going to be pretty good. And what they found was elite, and this is a quote directly from the book. I literally was reading it. I was like, oh my God, and then I wrote it down. So I'm going to talk about this one day. Elite performers spend 50% less time remediating security issues than low performers. And I think everyone would be happy spending less time remediating. And by having a robust DevOps pipeline, looking at these 4 metrics, this is how they did it. In terms of what that looks like, hey, have a dashboard where you can literally see, you can have a dashboard, you can see the graph. You can look at these stats, look at it on a project basis, look at it on a team basis, bring the gamification in, have a team competitor. It's like, oh yeah, my MTTR is better than yours. I worked with someone and they used to work in a bank. And on their, they had a big screen in the development, and that was literally their score on the security scanning tool. So why don't you use, and that was kind of like an incentive, no one wants to be at the top. So you can do carrot or stick, you can flip it, the best at the top or the worst at the top. And you can do that with the DORA metrics. One thing worth noting, beyond DORA metrics. So there was a great web page, a report done by, I'm going to pronounce it wrong, CMU, Carnegie Mellon University. And they actually said DORA metrics are great, but there are a couple of things missing. So they did this, it didn't quite fit on the page, so I actually chopped out the normal DORAs and then added some more. And then these are the ones, personally, which I say I really like, but I think are quite important because the top two that I've noted, customer issues. So whether it's the volume or whether it's the resolution time, customers are keeping you in business. Your paying customers pay your company, pay your bills. So it's important about having happy customers, and this comes back to the product mindset. So if you're having a big issue volume, that's not great. If you're having a big issue volume and you're not responding to them, that's even more of a problem. And then you probably have really stressed support people who are like overrun, etc. The other one I mentioned, time to patch vulnerabilities. This is just about risk. Because if you have a lot of vulnerabilities in production, it's just a matter of time. Whether it's hackers, whether it's nation states, whether it's malicious insiders, it's a good idea to patch your vulnerabilities smoothly. So the credit ratings agency I mentioned, it was a vulnerable version of struts, and the vulnerability and the patch came out on the same day, and then that probably just got lost in the backlog. And it took them 4 or 5 months to notice that they'd even been hacked. So it's important, as well as the DORA metrics, to look at these things as well. So why are we here? Why have you been listening so lovely for so long? So why DevSecOps? There's a couple of points. I hate reading off the slide, but I am going to do it, so sorry everyone. So incorporating security into DevOps helps speed up iterations. We can innovate faster than competitors. So what happens when you innovate faster than competitors? You're probably going to have a better product for your customers. And what are the customers going to do? They're probably going to move from your competitors to you. You're going to gain market share. So you're going to be in a really, really good space. Second one, vulnerabilities are identified earlier, which helps to avoid cyber attacks. This one is especially pertinent with everything that's kind of going on in the world. I don't think anyone wants to be hacked. If you do, okay, that's a bit of like, let's watch the world burn vibe, but anyway. And finally, improving communication and collaboration between teams. Because if you are in a good state of affairs, so, okay, your dev and the rest of your team, everyone's trained on security. They get it. They know it's important. The system's designed securely, it's automated, we're in a collaborative environment. Oh no, there's a 0-day, it's log4j part 2. We have the tools to be able to remediate quickly, we know where it is, we can work together. All of a sudden, that is a much more positive environment when different teams, not trying to turn them into each other, but trying to work together, you're going to have a good time. So, to end, my little summary. So, oh yeah, I just did 2 slides in a row of reading off, but anyway. Number 1, take a security-first approach. Education, secure by design. Just think about, at every level, what are your assets? What are your risks? What are your risks and what are your threats? Like, how does it relate to me? You can be in HR, you're like, well, I do have responsibility for everyone's, salary data or contract. Great! Make sure that that's password protected and it's not put on the shared Google Drive, It can apply to everyone. Break down silos. We are all on the same team. I think this is especially pertinent with what's happened the last 3 years, which we seem to have all just, moved on from what was COVID. But everyone has had their lives change. A lot of people have had personal stuff going on. So it's always important to remember that we are working together and you never know what's happening, behind closed doors or behind someone. So, being nice, breaking down silos, working together. And finally, make it fun, automate, and measure results. You want to empower your developers. So, thank you everyone for listening. My email, Stefania at DevSecOps. You can find me on my Twitter, my LinkedIn, my website. I do quite like talking, so if you want me to come to your company, to your conference, to your daughter's school, I do all three. So yeah, feel free to reach out, and thank you everyone for listening.
Fantastic talk, Stefania. Right, I've checked we don't have any questions on the slide though. So before we're going to start taking questions from the audience, because unfortunately we don't have an extra mic, can you please stand up and speak up, and Stefania can ask you to repeat the question into the microphone so people watching live could understand what you're talking about.
No long questions, like keep them one or two sentences long. Yeah?
Can you hear me?
Oh, I can hear you. I'll come a bit closer.
Cool. So let's say that the entire CI/CD process works and you have DevSecOps working right and everything goes well.
Yeah.
By the cloud.
Yeah, congratulations.
And then there is a security vulnerability out of nowhere. And then you have the security stack DevOps having to have a quick fix because everybody is threatening them. And then they make flaws. How can we put within the CI/CD process hot fix that are positive for, let's say, for our product for the rest of their, let's say, lifetime?
Okay, let me try and remember that. Okay, so you've got DevSecOps, it's going great, everyone's happy. Oh no, there's a problem, there's a bug. And by fixing that bug, it then introduces other flaws. So then how do you keep everything smooth and happy and going well? So
yeah, for the long term, for the software.
For like the long term. So there's a great oh, I can't remember the meme. It was a Jay-Z one about 99 problems. But I think it was the kind of thing was, oh yeah, I fixed one problem and something about 99 problems. But maybe I'll have it for my next talk. So this can be a real problem. If you fix something, something else might break. And especially when you're addressing technical debt, this is a big, mountain, because you're like, okay, I wanted to go look at that legacy app, and it was in Perl, and I tried to change something, and now the website's down. How that worked, I don't know, because one's on Amazon, one's on GCP, but it still failed. So this can be a real problem, and this comes back to what we talk about with batch frequency, where it's kind of about making really kind of small iterative changes just to test, because there can be, unknown effects. And also with the kind of shifting left, because say, for example, if you're fixing, say, a vulnerable component, and then you switch it for another one, but that other one has a transitive dependency, and that one is using log4j, then you're kind of in a backwards problem, which is to fix one problem 99 later. So it kind of comes back to how thorough is your security, and if you know that you have it as left as possible, that you're aware of your risk, then it becomes almost a case of sign-off, because sometimes there are times when it's really tricky to fix something. So is there a way we can isolate that? If it's internet-facing, if it's like the mobile banking app, that's a really high priority. So obviously we want to fix it, but if there are problems, then it's a case of managing that risk and then putting it in the backlog, but actually on the doable backlog. So hopefully that helped to answer your question. Yeah? And also, well done. You said that you knew all the things that I was, so.
Yeah, this is Amit here. You talk about the secure design angle, which is very important phase. So in a DevSecOps world, if you want to make threat modeling quicker and scalable, what would be your suggestion?
Sure. So, thank you for reminding me. So, talking about secure by design, threat modeling, how do you make it accessible, scalable, usable? Because the thing is, a lot of the time, threat modeling is it's quite manual and it's quite creative, because you really need to think, what are the bad actors going to be? It's like that joke. It's like a QA engineer walks into a bar, gets one beer, gets 999 beers, gets ASDG beers. Or what is a lizard? Fine. A real customer walks into the bar and asks where the bathroom is, and then the bar bursts into flames. So this is the thing. When you have threat modeling, I saw a talk, it was actually a DevSecOps London gathering a few years ago, and even the organizers, I was quite new in security, they're like, you're a bit ahead of your time. But they were talking about AI So machine learning threat modeling. I don't know that much about that space yet. It just kind of came to mind. But I think what we need to do is prioritize. So for example, think about, what are your mobile banking apps? What is internet facing? What has sensitive data? What is your tier 0? Not even your tier 1, your tier 0. If this fails, we don't have a company anymore. And then prioritize the threat modeling on that. Also empowering people. So like my Batman model, if everyone can think about what are their assets, potential attack vectors and their threats, then maybe organically people can think about, it's a bit like, making developers more secure. If you give them that secure mindset, they might be able to suggest ideas. And that's where security champions can be really helpful as well, because developers might think, actually, if someone right-clicked here, then maybe they'd end up in a totally different place that they shouldn't, for example. So I think it comes back to making everyone kind of 1% better, trying to make your security team scale, and then fingers crossed for the future of machine learning AI. Hopefully that answers your question. Cool. Any other questions, or we can have a break? Oh, so I think you were just first in the back.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit more about like automation? You mentioned it in your presentation, but
sure.
How we can bring automation into
automation. So what is the opposite of automation? Manual. So when we think about SRE, so site reliability engineering, if you haven't read, Google has a great playbook on it. And the way they talk about it is we'll never stop the pager going off, but we will improve the system. So I go to do surf and yoga a lot, and one of the yoga teachers, the fire alarm was going off every Friday at like 2 or 3 a.m. And I was like, if you improve the fire alarm, then maybe it won't go off, and then it will be fine. So when you're looking at, your tasks, your processes, everything, what can be automated? So a good, simple place to start is your security tests. Is someone manually going through every single line of code that you have? Probably not. Can you automate those security tests? Can you do scheduled security tests? There are 0 days. So can you do a scan, as you build, as you go through the different stages, as you deploy, but also maybe a scheduled scan every 24 hours at midnight when everyone's in bed, although different time zones. But anyway, just to check that everything's okay. So I'd say with security testing, that's a good place. You can also have different processes. So I read a really good book, actually I finished it today, called Investments Unlimited, which is like finance, Phoenix Project for finance. So they were talking about, this is my favorite, automated governance. And they were like, if we do this, we can get rid of the change management board. How amazing is that? And it actually echoed, I had a call the day before with a financial organization. I said to my salesperson, I was like, you need to read this book. They're literally talking about the conversation yesterday. So I think, start easy, start on the testing. But actually, if you can use automation for your governance and for policy, if you can say, yep, we're checking everything that goes in, we adhere with this, then you can start to automate. I'd say automate everything. Get creative. So, start easy, and then you can be amazed with how much you can automate. Also, with both of those questions, I would recommend reading, I could probably get it out of my bag, I was reading it on the tube, Glenn Wilson's book, because he has a whole chapter on secure by design, including threat modeling, and a whole chapter on automation. So that will be a good place for extra information. Cool, hopefully that answers your question.
Okay, I will try. So, it sounds great, right? But all that is about money. All of that is about investment, right? And often it's quite tricky to convince business actually to look at that and to invest in that, right? I know the easy answer how to push them is to allow system to be hacked, but it is not, the best way.
Is that ethical?
Yeah. Do you have any suggestions?
Yeah.
I mean, how to?
Okay, I think I remember this question. So a lot of what I've talked about requires budget. Is there an easy way to start this process without getting your company hacked? That was more or less the question. So yes, I agree. And this is where, in my experience, it's just quite good. Like, don't get hacked. I remember actually when I was a teenager, I saw a CSI Miami episode, and it was actually the son had hired his friend to rob the parents, and then his parents died because, all this other stuff. So yeah, don't hire your hacker friends to hack your company. It could go wrong. So we'll ignore that one. And then when it comes to that, an easy way is, okay, the OWASP tools. So have a little scan. It doesn't have to be, your most IP project, but just see what you have. And you're like, hey, I did this. I talk to developers a lot about if you want to start the security movement in your SME, use OWASP. Do some scans, see what you have, and be like, hey, did you know this component, 5 airlines got hacked by it in the last 2 years? So that kind of stuff. So creating a business case will help, but ultimately it does need budget. So that's why I say OWASP is great. A lot of it is free, and it's a good first step. And then once you kind of create enough of energy around this, because it's not just the money, it's the time. Who's going to make the fixes? Who's going to implement all these scans? So I think there is an initial upfront investment, but it's about, knowing that you're doing the right thing. And also what I said, if you make the right path the easiest path, then, people will follow. But sometimes it can be hard if you are the one starting paving, because people are like, oh, no, we don't have security problems. When I was working in open source 5-6 years ago, I would talk to people and they were like, we're not using open source. It's like, I'm pretty sure you are. Go back a year later. Oh yeah, no, we're using it, but everything's fine. Do you want us to look into your Maven Central report, see what you're actually downloading? And then we show them. So I think carrot and stick. If you you can see, start with the free tools, do little small starts. It's like deployment frequency. Start small. Talk internally, start the movement, get enough internal buy-in, and also, is this stick? Look at competitors or look at other people being hacked and be like, oh yeah, we have the component, but we have Log4j or a bad version of Strut, because especially when you talk to senior people with budget, no one wants to be on the front page. So, and that's because that conversation is becoming easier because Hacker News is on the front page. So yeah, hopefully that helps to answer your question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, there's one more. Which type of future trends do you see within security?
That's a great question. What are the future trends in security? So, with everything is shifting left to the point that developers, do they actually have time to develop anymore, because they're doing the sec, they're doing the ops? So I see a lot of AppSec either being absorbed by developers or automated, but it's kind of within the developer workflow. The other thing that I am keeping my eye on is the growth of AI, machine learning, and how that can help us with security. So, for example, I don't know if I can say this actually. I was talking to someone in another security provider, and I was talking about AI security, and they were like, oh, I know a thing about that. We actually have 50 patents, and that's going to be on the version 3 of our product, but I'm not going to name who they are. So I think especially that is machines are going to make our lives easier, but also harder as well, because we'll have to do this. So it's about having it easy, having it automated, and yeah, staying secure. Hope that answers your question. I know him, so that's why it's like, hi.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, and thank you everyone for listening.
Stefania mentioned the bathroom joke. The bathrooms are on the other side of the kitchen. We're going to have a 10-minute break, and then please come back promptly for Dario's talk. Just to remind you that we have a table with stickers with OWASP freebies. Make sure you get a sticker for your laptop. And also there will be QR codes all around and also on the screen, which will allow you to submit your CV to Amazon. And you will be able to win an Amazon gift card.
Great.
I'm just gonna go for a drink.
Let's hope they let me out. I might be like, no.
Look, we can definitely come up with some, like, at least give it a go.
passwords. But remember, this is only the camera is here. The camera is on top of the TV screen. Pointed in this direction. Yeah. But the camera over there doesn't work. This is the only working camera. If I walk, I come there, I might be. But I'm not walking. It's okay. Okay, everyone, it's my pleasure to introduce Dario Salice, who is a seasoned professional in the space of telecommunications, security, and online identity. Most recently, Dario was working at Google and Facebook, also known as Meta. He's no longer there, but I hope he's going to tell us all about it. So he provided all the right security tools to billions of users to protect their online accounts. So Dario also launched programs to protect highly targeted individuals from attack. While Dario was serving as Facebook's or Meta's representative on the board of the FIDO Alliance, an industry standard organization working on strong authentication methods, Dario gained a broader perspective on the global authentication market. His current focus is ramping up an independent boutique consulting service to engage with companies of any size who want to benefit from his insight and experience in the security and identity space. And actually, if you've never heard of Dario, he's probably one of the best experts in FIDO and passwordless authentication. So welcome, Dario.
Well, thank you. Thank you for raising the expectations. I mean, first of all, thank you, Stefania, for raising the expectations by having a great speech. And I think everybody's awake, and so that's more pressure on me.
Now you can knock them down. I warmed them up for you.
That was weird.
That was the deal.
Yeah, I'll see if I can keep my side of the bargain. Well, I mean, you heard more about me than I probably would have said myself in this intro. As Sam said, I used to be a product manager at Facebook, or Meta, however we want to call it, and at Google, working on security identity space. Did a bit of both from protecting people from highly targeted attacks and also protecting people from random spray and pray attacks that they could be exposed of. Represented Facebook on the board of the FIDO Alliance for a while. And now, since October 7th or so, I decided to try something else, leave corporate life for at least a little bit, and see if what I have and what I know and what I think is there's a market out there and people who want to talk to me about passwords and similar things. Who likes passwords?
Yeah.
That's okay. It's your own right. So maybe quick agenda. What do we go through here today? It's we'll talk about passwords. Why are passwords? When were passwords good? Why are passwords bad today? We'll talk about what a PassKey is or what PassKey is. How does it work? What is the experience? But the potential. Because nothing is a silver bullet. If there's anything that hopefully everybody reminds themselves every day in security, that nothing, whatever the vendor tells you, whatever the standard promises, nothing is a silver bullet. You're never going to solve all security issues. So we're not going to run out of work just because of next release of whatever your vendor sells you, but also the same thing for PassKey. It's not going to put us out of work because of limitations and attackers. So when were passwords okay? Passwords were okay at some point. Maybe some of you remember that at some point there were terminals standing in office buildings or in only few office buildings. And back then those terminals were there to people to access some applications, to enter data. And password there was good to define, to make sure that Jane and Bob can't access each other's terminal. So the password was only there for the two of them because they already had a badge to enter the building. They had access to the floor that had restrictions on who could get into that floor, and they had access to that room. So the password at that point was like the third or fourth factor to then access that terminal. Both of them only had one password to remember, and their attack surface was much smaller. So for Jane, the attack surface was Bob trying to get into her terminal and vice versa. So that has changed, and since then passwords are not good enough anymore, and they're getting worse and worse, and I think we're holding on to something that just doesn't work for us anymore. And it doesn't work for us in two different areas. I mean, we talk here about security. Everybody's thinking about security a lot here, and probably can come up with 20 reasons why passwords are not great for security, or why passwords are terrible for security. But they're also not great for access. So in addition to that passwords just don't protect us well, they're also not great for giving us and people access to services, because there's a lot of friction on it. And another thing that makes them almost even worse, they depend on the user's ability and motivation to make good decisions on what password to use, to manage those passwords, and be aware at every time they click, every time they enter the password, to think about, is this the place I should enter my password or not? I want to continue the tradition of today of mentioning books. So if you're interested in a book that I find very inspiring in terms of security, there's a book from 1965 called Unsafe at Any Speed. And it describes how the car industry had to implement security measures because they didn't get away anymore with assuming that people know how to safely operate and safely assemble and maintain the car themselves. So the car industry has gone through that, and I think we as an industry will also have to go through that. At the moment, there's a burden of making sure that people are secure is mainly on the people, on the users themselves. They have to decide which passwords to use. They have to decide if they can click on a link or not, and we're relying on them to make those decisions. And I think passwords are a crucial element to that where it's really failing us. So if we're looking at problems with passwords, and I think I'm preaching to people here who are thinking about this in a similar way, probably no surprises. I will, yes. Then I'll move on. Well, first of all, we don't make great decisions in managing our passwords. We use passwords that are guessable because we like to remember them. Sometimes we try to be smart and replace an A with a 4 or a $S with a $sign. But if that helps us remember the password, it probably also helps the attacker remember it. Passwords can get phished. Like, the password really doesn't care in which form it's getting typed into. I can type it into google.com to log into my Gmail account, or I can type it into badpeople.com, and it doesn't resist. It lets itself type into wherever. So that makes it really easy for phishing attack to succeed, for phishing attacks to perform well. And at that point, it really doesn't matter if my password was easy guessable, or it was the longest, most complicated password that any password manager has ever generated. If it's phished and it's out. And then we reuse those passwords. I mean, like, if any of you tells me that they never reuse the password, then either you're Bob or Jane that only has one password for your terminal, or you're just not very honest, or you're a genius and great, and maybe then you deserve all the respect in the world. Like, even with password managers, it's probably not that easy to not or never reuse passwords. And bad actors can spell. Like, we're still an industry that tell people, be aware of emails that have spelling mistakes because those emails are phishing emails. I find if your defense relies on your employees and your family members to detect spelling mistakes in emails, you're on very thin ice. If your defense is based on attackers not being able to spell or not able to use a spell correction tool, you're also on very thin ice. Problems with passwords are very common. I won't read these statistics here, but everybody's affected. Everybody makes the same mistakes. So passwords are really not doing a good job or an adequate job at protecting us. Now, the problem we maybe think a little bit less about is access. Passwords are not just easy to get us in trouble with, but they're also quite hard to use. People really struggle to manage their passwords. Like every time I look at my mother when she has to sign up somewhere, there's an elevated level of stress when the service asks her, now come up with a password. And that is hard for a lot of people, because now they have to come up with something they can remember, something that they feel is reasonable. Again, password 12345 might not be that. Even though I was able to set up a new Twitter account a few weeks ago using password 12345. Password 1234 was not acceptable. I felt, no, you can do better. Password 12345 was okay. And now we can be cynics about it and say, oh, well, they should also block password 12345. But at some point, it gets too hard for people to remember them. It gets too hard for people to come up with them. And then they fall back to something maybe even more ridiculous, their phone number with their name and behind. And then they lose effect. And also they lose, thank you. And also the people are not able to use them anymore. Like I wonder how the people who work at relying parties here see those numbers, but there's a lot of people who, when they change devices, they lose access to a lot of their previous accounts because they just don't remember those passwords. So it's not just a security issue that I think we all agree passwords are bad, passwords are not secure, but it's also an access issue. So it prevents a lot of people from continuously being able to access their services. It can be a growth hinderer, like you have acquired a customer and now you lose them because they have forgotten their password. So it's a lot of work for people to maintain them, and still doesn't put them into a really good sustainable security baseline. Passwordless. I think I just added this slide a little bit more for terminology than for anything else, because at the moment everybody talks about passwordless. Passwordless for enterprise, passwordless for consumers, passwordless with mobile authentication methods, passwordless in any other way. What people then forget, it's the nuance behind it. I think I differentiate between passwordless login, as in being able to log into a new account, on an account where you have a password with an alternative. The attacker, in that case, will still try to use the password. They will go through the lower, less frictionful, the cheaper way to attack the account. If you really want to tackle the problem, we'll have to move towards accounts that are passwordless. So that means accounts that don't have a password, a knowledge factor that people can get on hold of, that the attacker can fall back and fish and guess or get leaked from a credential dumps and benefit from us reusing them. So when next time some vendor or somebody talks to you about passwordless, ask them really, is this going to leave me with passwordless accounts, or is it quote unquote just a passwordless login alternative that will reduce friction? Yes, but is not significantly going to improve the security posture. So we've been talking about passwords and why they're bad in terms of access and in terms of security. And I promised to talk about PassKey. So let's go a bit into that and see how that works. So what is PassKey? For people who have known FIDO or platform authenticators before, it's usually the thing that the banking app asks you to create after you log in with a username or a password, to then say, do you want to use Face ID in the future to log in onto your account on that said device? That's basically what PassKey does across different devices. So these banking apps that I mentioned, what they would do, they create a set of cryptographic encrypted credentials on your local device that allow you to, instead of using a password to log in again, after you close the app and start it again, or you come back after 2 days, 5 days, 10 days, to use your Face ID, a local biometric, to unlock the vault or the keychain in which it is, and then authenticate with that. So what's new with PassKey is that now the standard, the WebAuthn standard and the FIDO standards allow platforms to synchronize these credentials across different devices. So once you create one of those credentials that authenticates that you are the one that is allowed to bypass the password step, that you can also do that on a different step, on a different device. So it will, for the first time, make it possible to use that local verification step to bypass the password, not just on the device you have set up now, but also on future devices. So let's walk through a bit. That maybe sounds cryptic, cryptography. That was not a pun intended. But let's walk a bit through the experience. How will a person or a user experience this? So I used to be a product manager. I'm not a product designer. So these are not product designs that anyone should implement. I'm also not a content designer or a UX writer. So I have been keeping it simplistic to show the mental model and the structure, but don't think that you should use that language to explain to people how to use it. So the PassKey experience starts with you're logged in on your app or on a website, and the service would offer you the opportunity to create a PassKey or to create a set of credentials that allow you to bypass the password in the future on your device. So in this case, I'm using a lot of iPhone and iCloud and Apple terminology, but the same mechanisms will also work on different platforms as they roll out PassKey functionality, and we can go into that a little bit later. So you would start with prompting the user, hey, Jennifer, do you want to create a PassKey? PassKey will allow you to bypass the password step in the future and offer you more secure login. User would say yes. They will go through, in the case of a more modern iPhone, they will go through a Face ID check. The credentials will be stored locally and on the iCloud keychain, and that will be it. So on the keychain, there's now an entry that contains that PassKey associated with the account for the service that it's associated with. Now, Jennifer loses her phone, drops it in the ocean, goes and buys a new one, buys a new device from the same ecosystem, uses the same iCloud account, installs the app, and then the app discovers there is a FIDO credential stored for this service on that keychain. So it will ask, do you want to use that one, or do you want to log in with a separate set of credentials? She says yes, and then Pat goes through the Face ID check, and then the login is successful. So what you might think now is, oh well, this is it uses biometrics to log in into the account, but the biometrics are not synchronized across the cloud in this case. So in this case, the biometrics are really just there to open up, to authenticate towards the keychain, extract the credentials, use them, throw them at the WebAuthn API, very technical term, how I use it. See, and authenticate as a service. So in this step, Jennifer didn't have to use a password anymore, which she probably forgot, which she probably has written down somewhere, but doesn't have on hand right now, and was able to log in. Now, I mentioned before, where is it supported? Like something I skipped a bit earlier on. Some apologies for that. PassKey is a new standard. It's being passed in W3C. It's been proposed just this year by the FIDO Alliance. So we don't see much adoption yet or that much support yet on PassKey. But what we have is commitment from the 3 platform vendors, Apple, Microsoft, and Google, that have said they are going to support PassKey within the next couple of months. Apple has started with this with iOS 16 and whatever the current macOS version is called. and new Safari versions, they support it. So if you're moving within the Apple ecosystem, you now have, there's some services like PayPal and eBay and probably a lot of that I haven't seen yet that will give you the opportunity to do that. So if you're moving within this ecosystem, you'll be able to benefit from those passkeys, from those credentials being synced across the keychain that then allow you to log in passwordless within your devices, with new devices. Google has announced that they're probably going to launch something end of this year, early next year, but this year is almost over, so I wouldn't hold my breath for 2022. Microsoft, I have not seen more concrete things, but somewhere in H1 next year, they're going to support it. So we spoke about why passwords are bad for security. Oh, I have to go closer. We spoke about why they're bad for access. So how can passkeys improve security? So whenever you have a login that is based on a passkey instead of a password, you have the assurance as the relying party that this login doesn't include anything that the bad actor was able to guess. So you're not going to be, you know that login is not just a login attempt, is not just a sophisticated password spray or semi-sophisticated password spray attempt. It couldn't be phished because you don't have a knowledge factor that can be phished or intercepted by some man-in-the-middle type of attack. It also can't be reused because it's a uniquely set of credentials that is created for each account, for each relying party in combination of that. So they really deterministically reduce a lot of the attack vectors that we have discussed before, make passwords such a bad authentication method. They're not just reducing the risk or make those attacks harder, but they make those attacks impossible. You're not spraying anything anymore, you're not phishing anymore, you're really having a login that you can trust that the account holder or the person who has issued that login attempt has access to a certain set of credentials. Means that they have successfully been able to access the iCloud keychain or Google Sync keychain or whatever the equivalent of that is in the Microsoft world. And it also reduces the user's responsibility to make good choices. So I think we spoke about it before, like passwords require people to make good choices. Sometimes you get away with password 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but sometimes you don't. But in this case, you don't have to make good choices. You rely on the cryptographic abilities of the platform to create safe or good enough credentials. How can it reduce churn? So we spoke about access being a big issue. When people abandon their old devices, they lose access to their accounts because they forgot what passwords they used before 1, 2, 3, 4 years when they set up that device for the first time. They often lose access to their .edu email address that they got when they were at uni, and now they don't have access anymore, so they can't reset the password of their account. They have forgotten the password too. So PassKey helps you there. It reduces or it eliminates the need for people to remember something. There's a bit of an asterisk, as long as they remember the access to their platform account, like the iCloud or the Google account. But it really doesn't require them to remember a password for every type of service they use. It doesn't require dedicated hardware or software. Like it doesn't require them to install an authenticator app for which they probably lose the seed key and then lose access to it once they abandon their device. It doesn't require them to buy a security key to go through as they had to do with other FIDO standards. So it works with what they already have. And it makes those credentials available across different websites and apps and surfaces and devices. So one of the access problems that I described before is not just people who switch devices and lose access to it, but a lot of the people in the consumer world, and especially outside of our part of the world where people have older devices, they often suffer from lack of storage space. So they end up deleting applications they don't need that day or in that week, and then reinstalling them later again. This allows them to keep a persistent login and session across the life cycle of those apps. So they don't have to go and log in every time again they reinstall the Twitter app or their banking app or the app that they use to file tax returns once a year or even fewer times. So I'm just stopping because I thought that slide should have come before, but I just moved it. So you now have seen how people log in within their ecosystem using PassKey. So if I lose my old iPhone, I buy a new iPhone, that pass is relatively straightforward. Install the app, discovers that I have some discoverable credentials that can be used on that new device, log in, bypass the password step. Now, because the synchronization of these passkeys happens within the ecosystem of the platform provider at this point, it might change in the future. The problem is then, well, how do I log in on a Windows computer if I have an iPhone? Or how do I log in on a Chromebook if I have an iOS device or vice versa? So what Apple has launched and what Google will launch and Microsoft as well, they have demoed those things, is cross-platform login with PassKey. So how that works is they will establish a local connection between the different devices. So in this case, Jennifer starts her app again, and there is no PassKey. There's no set of credential on that device that can be used to log in without the password. But the app supports it and asks, hey, do you want to use a different device to log into that app? So in this case, Jennifer has an iPhone. She takes a picture of the QR code. What the QR code does, it's establishing a Bluetooth or a BLE connection between the device that's already logged in, the one that has the passkey, and the device where she's trying to log in onto. And then exchanges the information. She has to go through Face ID, if it's an iPhone, fingerprint, or whatever if it's a different device, and then establishes a session on that new device. Well, now you would think, why does it have to be a Bluetooth connection? Bluetooth is difficult and hard and adds friction and causes problem. The reason is that having a connection that connects through some centralized server and then back, which then could Jennifer in this case put at risk of being at risk for phishing, you need a local connection. And then that's what the Bluetooth connection does. It ensures that the person who's authenticating and the surface they want to authenticate to is being rendered in a device on the same location, and not one is badpeople.com that runs some evil jinx proxy in their data center and then forwards everything to the proper site, and the other one is what the user has in hand. So it solves the phishing problem in a similar way that FIDO security keys solve the phishing problem. It solves the phishing problem in a similar way or in the same way that passkeys solves the problem, by really requiring a local user interaction between the relying party they're logging into and the user that is authenticating in real time. Now, how do you get PassKey out there? I think, as I said before, there's a couple of limitations, and we'll talk about a few more of them a bit later. But like with every other thing, like with every other change, it requires companies to make an investment in changing from what has worked good enough at the bottom line maybe so far to support something new. But we have the limitation that not every device supports PassKey yet. Not every user has the capability to authenticate on all of their devices with PassKey. So I think there's a sensible 4-phase or N-phase rollout that could be done that makes sense and delivers some value for your business right now, and then allows you to build on top of that over time. So phase number 1, let's do an opportunistic rollout. At this point, as of November 17th, it's probably up 25 to 30% of iOS users, probably 8 or 10% of macOS users that can use PassKey on their current device. So it's a relatively small number of people. But if you can get these people enrolled into creating a PassKey, get them to use it on the next login, you're certainly going to see a reduction in churn. These people won't have to rely on their memory or their superhuman ability to manage passwords to log in again on the next device. They will just be able to use it right away. And you're starting to get a certain number of logins in which you can trust more than in the others. At that point, you still have passwords. Like, the attackers will still try to get those passwords. That's not going to change. But at least you will have some number of logins that have gone through with lower friction, and you can go to your growth team, you can go to your marketing team, whoever cares most about retention, and then show them that that the investment you have made has an immediate business value for you, as in increasing retention. Second step, you can then start to stop or trust passwords even less than you did before. Now, you have a certain number of people who have a PassKey, who are able and have demonstrated that they're able to log in with a password alternative once they buy a new device. Certain number of people who have shown that they're moving horizontally within their ecosystem, like they're moving within the Apple, the Google, the Microsoft ecosystem. So those are accounts that if you see a password-based login coming from them, you could start to be much more suspicious. You could either tweak your risk engine to trust that, to add relative risk to every login that is based on password from a user that has proven to be able to use PassKey, or you could add deterministic speed bumps in every password login that could also be a PassKey login. So that is the first moment where you're raising the security bar, because you have some people who could use the more secure way, but for some reason you see a password-based login, and because they have shown to be able to use PassKey, you could just say, I just don't trust those password logins as much anymore, because that is more likely to be an attacker, a bad actor, than it is to be the good actor. So the impact there is really, you make password compromise harder. You make them more expensive, and you force the attacker to move horizontally within whatever audience of victims that they're going for, and trying to find other people who are still, where passwords are still the primary and preferred method of authentication. Once you have that, you can start to be more adventurous. You can start to remove password as an option for signups. If somebody signs up on a device that supports PassKey, that has the ability to create these credentials and synchronize them across a cloud-based keychain, there's no reason for you to give them access to the password anymore, or to force them to create a password. So that solves my mother's fear that every time when she's being asked for a password, her heart rate just goes up by 50 or 60 until she remembers that she could just use one of her old passwords with a lot of variation and write it down on a Post-it, and then she calms down again. So you solve that point of friction, and you're going to have passwordless accounts. You're going to have accounts that for the first time don't even have a password. And that means they have a completely different, or they have a significantly different risk profile. Like those accounts, you don't have to worry about them getting password sprayed. You don't have to worry about those people getting phished. The only thing one of the things you probably have to get worried about is that they get tricked into creating a password, if they have that ability, that then gets phished. But that's significantly more expensive than trying password12345 on a Twitter account that I created 6 weeks ago, and maybe some of you have already found. I can give you an Amazon gift card if you find it. Let me know after the presentation or tomorrow or in a week. By the way, I wanted to make the Amazon gift card joke already before. Some people have traded in passwords for Amazon gift cards. That is also quite a popular thing to do. If you have 2FA, maybe that's a good thing to do. You can an easy way to get gift cards. But sign up on the website there. That's an even easier way to get one. So phase 3 is we're removing passwords for sign up. We're ramping up numbers of accounts that don't even have a password, which makes it harder for attackers. They will have to invest more time in finding accounts that are still vulnerable. And then phase N, the end goal, let's get rid of passwords. But let's be clear, this is going to be a long phase. This is not going to be something most relying parties are going to do within the next year or 2 or 3, because the implications on potential growth, the implications on the reliance on your recovery process is going to be significant. But it is a goal to which you can work towards because now you have an ability to authenticate without the password that lives with the life cycle of most users who continue to live within their ecosystem. We're going to see different players who are also going to implement PassKey, like password managers and probably other security companies. So the way these PassKeys synchronize in a secure way across different devices will probably expand. But if we're concerned about people who use password 12345, those are usually not the ones that are using sophisticated password managers anyway. So I think the biggest impact is going to be with people who move within their mobile and operating ecosystem. So there's obviously always a problem. There's always a but or more, and it's quite complex. Like if we're looking at this as a funnel, like I've spoken to marketing and growth people about PassKey. And they always wanted to see, well, in theory, yes, this is great. You have X number of people who every month, every year, drop out of monthly active users because they have forgotten their passwords. You have a certain number of accounts who go temporarily or permanently dormant because they have forgotten that. But how many of those people can you really get back with PassKey? And I think that's where really you need to talk to your data scientists, to your analytics team, in order to understand what is the opportunity you can have here. That the funnel starts with people who can even create a PassKey credential at this point. What did I say before? It's iOS 16 and newest version of macOS, whatever that is, and Safari. So it's a relatively small community of people who can create that. Yet, depending how your service is designed, or who your target audience is, you might have more or less users who fall into that. Over time, that will go up. So that's something you have no influence on. You can't move. You can't convince, or you're unlikely to be able to convince your users to upgrade phone with reasonable effort. So it's just something that will play on over the next couple of years. And then you have to convince them to create a PassKey. I think that should be a smaller problem because people are already used to allow their apps to use Face ID to log in, to do continuous user authentication. And this is the same user flow. But you'll have to explain them why is it better than what they had before. Why should they do it now? And so it's a bit of an upsell and a bit of a it's almost like a feature sales mechanism that you have to go through. So you'll lose your funnel will drop off at some point. And then you'll go and have people who log in on a new device. And that new device has to be from the same ecosystem. It has to be from using the same platform account. And those are both things that might be correct for many of us here, but the ratio in which people maintain access to their platform accounts varies highly depending on the geographies. They have to want to continue to use the service. They have to pass the next step, and then only then you'll see a difference in a success rate in terms of churn reduction and actual passwordless logins. So now that sounds very negative and pessimistic, but I just wanted to walk you through this funnel that is a combination of steps that you as a relying party can influence and steps that you as a relying party are not able to influence, to give a bit of a more realistic picture of how much of a slow burner a new standard like PassKey could feel like it being in the next 1 or 2 years. So if you came to this presentation hoping that tomorrow you can roll out something that will solve all of your password needs, I'm sorry I disappointed you. I hope that was the biggest disappointment of my presentation then. So another few buts. As I said, PassKey support is still quite limited, but the commitment of the large vendors is there. So at least over the next couple of months, we'll see support in newer versions of operating system increase, which makes it more attractive for relying parties to implement it. And I think there's a good opportunity for this cycle of adoption to be faster than maybe with other passwordless authentication methods we've seen before. What PassKey will do, it won't just put all these bad actors out. It won't put all these bad actors out of work. Like the ones that today are phishing you and trying to guess passwords and you buy credential dumps to spray and use them at other services. They will try something else. And it is probably safe to say that the scrutiny will increase on the platform accounts. So while today it's cheap, very cheap for somebody to compromise your username and password-based account by phishing or like spraying, or well, password 12345 Twitter account is certainly a cheap one for somebody to get. It will get more expensive, and then they will go for these underlying platform accounts. So getting access to somebody's iCloud account, getting access to somebody's Google account or Microsoft.com account or Microsoft 365 account will get more value because it will give them access to those passkeys and make compromise possible through the login path. So as a relying party, again, you're not going to be able to just dump your risk-based engines in the trash and forget everything that you had before, not just because passkey adoption will be a slow ramp up, but also because the attack vectors are going to evolve. The issue of recovery is not solved yet. And you're still going to have to offer people a recovery flow. And recovery flow is something I sometimes call it's the cheap login flow. Like it's a backup method for people to log in who have forgotten the thing that you wanted them to do in the first place. So people will still lose access to their iCloud accounts. People will lose access to their email addresses, and those things won't go away. So recovery is still going to be a big problem that you need to be aware of. Yeah. Well, I think just as a conclusion, I think passkey, and I will be curious on how your impression is, but passkey is going to be a good opportunity for us to reduce the reliance we currently have on passwords. Like their passwords are today omnipresent. Everybody uses them. Every service uses them as their first line of defense. So we'll be able to reduce our reliance on it, but we'll only be able to do it in a relatively slow way, in a way that takes a bit longer than many people have hoped. But because of it being a standard and it being adopted in the same way by the big platforms, it will be a much more sustainable way to do that than if everybody has to implement their own capabilities and their own alternatives. Questions? I know we don't have a microphone, so I'll also repeat the questions.
First off, big thank you. More questions again.
stand up and speak up, and Dario, can you please repeat the question into the microphone? We still have time.
And will you tell us how much time we'll have, or when we'll run out of time? Yeah, I think your hand was up first.
So how do we protect privacy? So if this is all going through a centralized cloud providers, Apple, Google, whatever, Facebook, how do we stop? Because every time we log in, they're going to know we've logged to this site, we've logged to that site.
Yeah, good question. Can you repeat it?
Yeah, exactly. So the question is, how do we protect privacy? Because the platform provider now being more involved in the login process. It depends a bit what type of information do these platform operators already have? I mean, they have a lot of information about what do we use, when do we use it, which applications do we use. We're already using their infrastructure to synchronize browser histories.
Some people.
So some people
I have that
are,
all turned off.
Exactly. When I say we, a lot of people are. I'd be curious how the PassKey is not going to add substantial.
I'm thinking of metadata really. Is that looking at Facebook, looking at your tracking history? You went to this site. They don't know what you did on that site, but they know you logged into that site. So therefore, they can target you.
They already know that you're opening that site right now. I think what it reduces is, in theory, like if you're synchronizing a password, that they could know which passwords you're using. They're not storing passwords in their database. They're storing public keys that are not useful to them and are not useful to anyone who could compromise them. So from a privacy perspective, I don't think it's exposing them to more information than they already have, because they already know.
I don't think it's exposing more information, but I think it's every time I log on to site X, they know I logged in. They know I logged in, so they know I regularly go there, so they can build up stats that you regularly, so they can send that to advertisers to target me as an audience, just because I'm using a standardized service that's going to allow, whilst it reduces the friction, and it's just a massive improvement with security, but it's a trade-off in my view.
Yeah, I think it's certainly a topic to dig in deeper. I'd be interested in, like today the browser is storing cookies and tokens. So they're already managing the sessions for us. And that's not changing. So it's really just the way we authenticate that is changing, and we're not authenticating more often or less frequently. So the value that they would have to use session data for targeting is already here. Like they're managing our cookies and tokens across different devices. We're not increasing that factor, but it's always something to review. I think for a relying party to use it, they have to review it. But
as be on the authentication mechanism. Will it become also harder as an implication? Will it become harder to create temporary throwaway accounts or anonymous accounts, because the credentials are essentially tied to your identity?
Okay, is your question if it will become harder to create throwaway accounts?
Say if you want to preserve your privacy for whatever reasons, political or whatever.
Yeah, maybe, but I would say the whole mechanism in preventing like fake accounts or like impersonated account is a few layers above currently already in the relying party. What you still need a contact point. Like PassKey is not going to eliminate the need for a username or for a user identifier to be created, and that user identifier doesn't have to be your platform account. Like, so it doesn't have to be your iCloud account. That people will still have the choice to use either a burner email address to create a new account in combination with a password or a passkey, or if they want to use their platform account. So it might make it easier for people to consolidate all of their identities to one email address, which I think then comes to I think much more of a privacy question than the passkey itself. But it won't require that. People will still be able to use whatever type of contact points they want, and that doesn't have to be the same that they're using to manage their keychain. I think that hand over there was first, and then, yeah.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
You want to go first?
Yeah.
Okay, please go ahead.
Stand up. In terms of like fingerprint.
Yeah.
So I noticed like sometimes a website like asks me to sign in, and then says keep signing in next time with a fingerprint.
Yeah.
What do you think about fingerprinting and like it's kind of like as an entity to use, and let's say kind of like could we possibly like eliminate totally the password and just sign in the first time with a fingerprint, which is kind of centralized to one identity provider that can offer that information? Mm-hmm. Like, is it so far from where we're going? Because I guess so many people would start the first password and then it would be a very simple one. And if you have this key passphrase set up, then if someone finds the password, then can enter all accounts and everything that the person really owns. So can we start like just like moving to a like biometrics kind of way? But why is it so difficult? Why do you think it's such a big step? And what do you think about the fingerprint? So it's a big question.
Yeah, so, yes, I'll try, and I hope I give it justice, because it's a very nuanced question. The question is like, why do we even have to go through the whole loops of creating these new methods and then storing them onto an account that is still protected with a password? Why can't we just use fingerprints to log in on new devices? And I think there's multiple aspects of this, and the biggest and the most prevalent one is the risk of storing fingerprints in a centralized way is just significant. Like the cost of doing that in a way that meets all the regulatory requirements that are getting harder and harder, justifiably, and I think we're moving in a good direction with these regulations, most of them, is getting higher. And then the risk of what happens if they get compromised. Like a few years ago, there was a big initiative in India where they started to collect hundreds of millions of fingerprints to have in a centralized database to authenticate, to give people a way to authenticate using their fingerprint on federated services. And as with new endeavors, often like at some point they found some operational issues. Shout out DevSecOps is important. Keep that in mind, and also some technological issues. So storing fingerprints is scary and dangerous, and I think can be costly. So whenever possible, people try to steer away from it. From a technical point of view, it's probably would be quite easy, but all the risks that are implied with it and then come with it are just beyond the business value it generates for most use cases. And I think that's why I think the industry is steering away from it. It's also a privacy question. Like the privacy question would be much more relevant if we would start to store fingerprints centralized, because then you really be able to tie people together across accounts that currently you can't, or currently you can only do with much less perfection. So it's a privacy and legal risk that I think nobody wants to take on them. Yes, you were.
Yes, thank you. Just about a few comments about these previous questions about the privacy that they mentioned about the key pass. I mean, practically it's the same issue that you're having right now with any SSO implementations, like for example, SOM or OAuth or any identity provider. You just basically, doing the same thing here. But my question is that KeyPass is obviously not a silver bullet, so it's a right direction, in my opinion. But when do you think that we will get rid of the password for like good, like never ever any password again?
Yes. So the question is, when will we be able I'm being asked to make a crystal ball prediction on when will we get rid of passwords completely.
I think 2028.
I think the answer is probably somewhere between never and a long time. The good thing about the only good thing about passwords is almost everybody can use them. They almost work on every surface. Like it's technologically such a low bar to implement in a functioning way, not even in a responsible way, that as soon as we move away from passwords, there is going to be some fragmentation. And that's why I think that they're always going to be here to some level. The question is really, how much can we reduce the reliance on them where they're not doing a good enough job as of today, and reduce the risk. But yeah, I don't think I will attend the password deprecation party in my lifetime. Yes.
Thank you very much for the talk. I just had a question about the recovery you mentioned on the bots. I still don't really understand. So with the recovery, would it be just a password reset ultimately with the original identity you used to sign up? Is that the current proposal, or is that the current implementation?
That is absolutely the question, depending what the relying party wants to do. Yeah. So I think that's probably what most will do in the beginning.
Yeah.
Where the recovery flow through which you either prove that you have access to the email address, or you have to go through an identity verification flow, which you have to provide whatever identity documents they're accepting, will lead you to create either a PassKey on that device or create a new password.
I think for my worry about this is this, similar to SSO, you are creating a single source of failure. So what the expectation there is that the frequency of compromise would be reduced, but the depth of potential compromise becomes more severe. So in that sense, it actually makes me nervous in some ways to implement something like this, just like it would with SSO. So in a lot of ways, is this not a massive trade-off between convenience and security?
So I didn't repeat the first half of the question. I think replacing passwords with passkeys and then putting the focus on the recovery flow, which then can still be abused by the attacker. So the question is, how much of a security improvement is it if we're still having those recovery flows? Well, it is, because we're closing down the cheapest avenue at the moment. Like the recovery flow is a flow that can have more friction. It doesn't even have to be real time. Like, yes, resetting a password first factor is something people have an expectation that happens fast, but that's something that doesn't have to scale to the same amount as the login flow does. So as a relying party, you can implement more rigorous checks than maybe you want to do in the login flow, and with that make it harder and make it less automatable than the password login flow. But just because it remains an attack vector that is going to be abused and is possible to abuse, it doesn't mean that it's a higher security bar, because you're forcing the attacker to change their behavior and to go for a flow that per definition can be slower and likely to have more friction. And so you're slowing the attacker down, and you're either forcing them to find people who are still subjected to password attacks, or they have to get the same volume with a slower flow. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Where other hands? I saw one here before. No? Well, then. Yeah, go ahead.
Say you're a web application or API developer, and you're implementing sign-up flow. Is there a way a device or browser can hint you that passkeys are supported, so that you prioritize it as an authentication?
So the question is,
specification or.
So the question if the browser can hint you if you want to do that or not.
Functionality.
It has to be called by the relying party. The relying party has some signal to detect if a device can use it or not. The signal is not that perfect. There's a lot of privacy considerations there to not disclose too much information about that device. But the relying party has to call the browser API to do a check to create a passkey. So it couldn't be just the browser doing it spontaneously. It has to be called from the relying party. First her behind you. Sorry.
Thank you. What's your opinion on whenever an app or a website asks as a recommended password that they would suggest to you, like this confusing thing that you would never remember? Is that something that you would suggest say yes, and then it's stored in PassKey or your keychain if you're using iOS, or
okay.
If that gets hacked into and you lose your passwords in your keychain or whatever, I won't remember it ever.
So the question is, should I, if a website, not the browser, but a website suggests me a specific password, if I should trust that over the one I come up with myself? Probably not, because I don't know how they generate those random passwords. I mean, I assume it's probably safe. It's never safe to assume, but they're probably not going to have just a list of static passwords they're going to suggest to me. But as soon as the way they're suggesting those passwords is known, then somebody else could reproduce them. So I think that the best way, if you want to use randomly generated passwords, is use something that is completely agnostic of that website, and then use a password like that. And that's where the browser suggestions also they use algorithms that are agnostic, that are not using the website as information as a base to suggest those passwords. Having a generated password is better than what I could come up usually, probably. I mean, it's like password 12345 versus something that a piece of software generates is always going to win. It's always going to lose, password 12345, but it's still a password in the end. It's still something that in theory can be guessed and in practice can be phished. Yes, sir.
Okay. I've got a short comment and a question. My comment is related that I came across that biometrics should never be the password, but only the ID. Well, you cannot change your biometrics, can you? The password you can. Good. My question is, and I found it very interesting that Google, Microsoft, and Apple, you said, work together with PassKey. How about the Linux community? Will it lead into that? So.
Yeah. Okay. So comment and a question. The comment: never use biometrics as a password. Yeah, you can't change it. And I think that's also not the case with this here. Like, we're not using biometrics as a password replacement. The only thing that biometrics is being used is to open up the keychain and extract that credential. So that means it doesn't have to be the same face or the same finger that looks at it on the new device to open up the keychain, which is less secure because the access to the keychain gives you access to the castle, and with that you can get access to these passkeys, but it certainly doesn't use the credential, the biometrics as a password. Biometrics can't be changed, that is true, but I think there's also an acknowledgement in the biometrics community that we're going away from the myth that we can protect things like biometric information completely. I think that's where liveness checks come into play. Biometric signal in itself, just the signal alone, is just not as much worth. So a fingerprint can be reproduced, but if you don't have any liveness checks that come either with the fingerprint signal or as a signal in addition to that, you're going to be at risk of just being tricked by replay attacks. So I think that's not a direction. The second point was Can you help me?
Linux.
Oh, Linux, yes. I mean, yeah, it's the open source community that is asked here. Like there is it's built on WebAuthn. Like the WebAuthn WebAuthn is an open standard, can be implemented in any browser, and this.
That it works together with iCloud and these things is what I mean.
I think that will be a difficult one. I don't know if Apple will open up their keychain to Linux developers. Probably not. But it doesn't have to work with the existing keychain. You could either use the QR code, the cross-platform QR method that I explained, or you could then implement your own synchronization method. How these passkeys get synchronized across different devices is not part of the standard. So that is up to the platform. You can implement a synchronization service yourself with all the risks and the effort that it comes with, but that is not something that per definition is limited to Apple and Microsoft and Google.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think he was first, and then. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I have a few questions. They might be slightly naive, but I'll probably still ask them. So essentially, it was kind of the question along my colleagues, this gentleman in front of me, along his lines. Why is it so difficult to get vendors to adopt to open source or decentralized systems that allow for? Because what it seems like it is by having a few vendors, you significantly reduce your attack vector. So if we're now able to attack iCloud or Google, we have access to the keychain. Say, for example, if we have a technique to, like a Trojan horse system that can infect Apple devices, we can suddenly access all iCloud accounts. So why is it so difficult to get these companies to start using more universal or open source systems that we can continuously check? And then the second comment was probably sort of like similar to the point that you made, that it is quite easy to hack into biometrics because you can use deep learning techniques to authenticate voices and things like that. But which type of liveness checks could we introduce alongside, say, for example, biometrics that could reduce, that could improve security? The sort of like biometric I kind of imagined was like monitoring rapid eye movement along with looking at spectrograms of voices. May not be a sort of like feasible trajectory.
Okay, so I think there's two questions in there. One is why aren't we looking at more decentralized identity systems to solve the authentication problem and distribute attack vectors? And then the second one is about liveness checks for biometrics. Just to go to the first one, is it's a question of complexity. I think you have. I think decentralization or decentralized IDs are probably not going to come to reduce complexity. They might come because of regulatory requirements. So what is the interest of an identity provider today to decentralize them? You might even be arguing that you're increasing the number of attack vectors, because instead of having a few different hubs of risk awareness, you're going to increase them by magnitudes or by infinite numbers. So I think that one of the advantages from a security point of view, privacy is a completely different question, of having these small, relatively few identity providers, is that they have quite good visibility of threat vectors, attackers, and attacker behavior. So you would lose that to a big extent with decentralized IDs. If somebody wants to accuse me of being brainwashed because I've spent time with centralized identity providers, they're probably not completely wrong. But I think there's an advantage of some centralization, which is not yet evened out with the disadvantage of the increased complexity. Liveness for biometrics. your question was what type of liveness checks would make sense to introduce?
Yeah, so essentially, and would there be really that much added protection with liveness checks? Because say, for example, with Face ID, Face ID, from what I understand, works on a local machine, but you can still bypass something like Face ID or Touch ID using either deep learning techniques to replicate the specific type of face, or you could use an image to replicate a single fingerprint. But like you said, like liveness checks would be significantly harder to replicate. But that's not something. Maybe that's what maybe they've already implemented that in Face ID, but it doesn't seem like there's any sort of like cross-platform liveness checks.
Okay, so the question was about what liveness checks are already here, and how do they work cross-platform? And I don't think they don't work cross-platform, because all of those methods are at this point, I mean, if you talk about Face ID and Touch ID and fingerprint, they're really just local. They're using some different levels of liveness check, is like to see, is this is it a 2D picture, or is it an actual face? Like in the case of Face ID, you have I don't know how many hundred dots that are being of infrared light that have been projected on people's face, that detect with some level of confidence that this is not just a picture, or also not just a mask that somebody is wearing. The sophistication of those liveness checks always depends on the attack vector. Because those biometrics are local, you still need access to the device. You can't just throw a face model against an API remotely and then get a result back, and then iterate that until you get something right. So these liveness checks always rely on the fact that you need local presence. There was a few years ago, a Black Hat was a case where some researchers were able to put a pair of glasses on somebody's face with some black tape and white tape in the middle, and that would trigger Face ID, and Face ID would unblock the phone. Sure, it's a very cheap attack, but you need to get the right owner of the phone unconscious or worse, which is already quite a cost. Like it's not the cost the scammer from far away is going to do to then be able to then run a few fake YouTube views or ad clicks on your account. So getting the person unconscious or worse, putting those glasses on them and then pointing their own phone at them is an attack vector that requires a lot of costs and brings a lot of risk. So that is already, it's not the attack vector it tries to protect from.
Unfortunately, we're out of time.
Okay.
So thank you very much. If you have any further questions, can you please ask them after the event? A reminder that we have food and drink, but everyone who submitted their names for the raffle, all right? So stick around because we're going to do a raffle now.
Yeah, and if you have my... Not my public Twitter account, it's a different one, so you'll have to do some OSINT.
The one with password 12345. Okay, so before I gonna show the raffle wheel, I have to end the live stream because we're gonna show people's names.